This is a sport that is currently popular all over the world, called the elevator exercise, also known as Kegel exercise. It's named after the person who developed it. Kegel exercises are commonly practiced in maternal and child health hospitals, postpartum care centers, by those doing postpartum recovery, as well as in prenatal Pilates and yoga classes, and even in fitness training. Everyone is practicing it. So what exactly are they practicing? When you exhale, you imagine your elevator going from the second floor to the third floor, then up to the fourth floor, or you lift it up and hold for a few seconds, then slowly control it and gradually bring it back down. That's right. First, let me give you a conclusion. Kegel exercises is a very good exercise, extremely good, but it is only suitable for people who are transitioning from not being able to feel their pelvic floor muscles to being able to find and feel them. In other words, it is only appropriate for this particular stage. At this stage, it is the most convenient and the easiest for people to understand and perform worldwide, which is why it is such a great invention. However, if you keep doing this exercise all the time, you could actually end up damaging what was originally a perfectly healthy pelvic floor muscle. Many people might not understand this, and hardly anyone would dare to stand on stage and say it, but I'm just this kind of blunt person. I dare to say anything. Some people say those people are world-renowned, while you only have a bit of fame in China's fitness community. I don't care about that. I'm not concerned with those things. I just speak reason. I don't judge people. So why do I say this? Listen to my explanation coming up. Every day, I share a lot of knowledge with you, and as long as you can learn even one thing each day, you've already gained a lot. This one thing is something people all over the world are teaching, but some people benefit from it while others are actually harmed by it. The only difference is that those who are harmed don't realize it. They don't know the secret that it's this very thing causing them harm. Let me ask you, if you're the boss, who are you? You're the brain. Every action our body takes is a result of instructions sent by the brain. Let me put it this way. You are the brain. Each of our muscles is like a different person, each playing a unique role. Right now, standing here on the podium, I am your teacher. But when I step off the stage, after class, many of you are my big brothers, my best friends, my family, my comrades. If we go work out together, then you're my colleagues. And when I go home, I'm just a child. In front of my parents, I am their child. Our muscles are the same way. Take our pelvic floor muscles, for example. They have several important functions: supporting the internal organs, assisting with exhalation, and acting as a sphincter, which means stopping the flow of urine and stool. You can categorize all its functions into these three main types. There's also another function, like maintaining the stability of the pelvis, also stabilizing the sacrum and coccyx, but these aren't as important as the first three. So, if you were to rank these functions, how would you order them? Which is most important? Right, supporting the internal organs is most important because all the organs in our thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities are centralized and pulled down by gravity, so they all rely on the pelvic floor muscles to hold them up. In other words, supporting the internal organs is their most crucial function. Then, the second most important, would you say it's breathing or sphincter function? Breathing is the third, and how about the sphincter function of the diaphragm? What is the diaphragm's primary function? Inhalation. The second is maintaining the stability of the thoracic cavity. And the third, the diaphragm also has a sphincter function. So you'll notice that both of these important respiratory muscles have a sphincter function and both have ducts passing through them. Now, here's the issue. Our brain is actually quite, smart. Whenever it does anything, it weighs how much energy it needs to spend and how much effort it should contribute to accomplish the task. For example, I can lift up to 500 kilograms, but right now, I just need to pick up this stick. After looking at the stick, my brain will estimate about how much it weighs, probably less than half a kilogram. So at this moment, do I need my brain to recruit the strength to lift 500 kilograms just to pick this up? No, that would be a huge waste of muscle, and doing so would consume a lot of my energy. So when I pick up this stick, after assessing that it weighs less than half a kilogram, I just need to use the strength equivalent to lifting about 1 kilogram at most, and that's enough. This is what the brain does. Now, you're the boss and you're in control of your pelvic floor muscles. So let me ask you, when your pelvic floor muscles are supporting your internal organs, is it that the muscle fibers contract more powerfully and with greater strength when supporting the internal organs, or do they exert more force when you exhale? It's definitely when supporting the internal organs because the organs are heavy. When I'm just exhaling, why would I need to use so much force? Do you understand? Our diaphragm can move up and down by as much as 10 centimeters. So why is it that when we inhale, it only moves about 1.2 centimeters, and yet we can fill our lungs with 500 milliliters of air? What are the remaining 8.8 centimeters for? The remaining 8.8 centimeters are for when I'm lying down, which allows for a greater range of movement. Also, it's for peak contraction. When I contract to my absolute limit, like when my body is extremely unstable or when I'm bearing a heavy load, I can generate even more force. In other words, if you ask me to lift 2 jin, I'll recruit a certain amount of muscle. If you ask me to lift 20 jin, I'll recruit more. If you ask me to lift 200 jin, I'll use even more. And for 200 kilograms, I'll recruit even more muscle fibers. When you're lifting 500 kilograms, every muscle fiber I can possibly recruit will be activated. This is what the brain does. It decides based on its assessment and experience how much muscle to engage. Now, considering how heavy your internal organs are, and with all those organs, plus when you're running or jumping, boom, when you land, there's an added acceleration. Then, with all the Kegel exercises you do, it's always inhale as the elevator goes down, exhale as the elevator goes up. So, what function of the pelvic floor muscles are you actually training? When exhaling, let's say the pelvic floor muscles have a total strength of 100 jin, but when I exhale, I only need to use 10 jin of force. You can see this from the descent and ascent of the diaphragm. The range of its movement is 10 centimeters, but for breathing, I only use 1.2 centimeters. In other words, I only need to use 10% of the muscle's maximum strength for breathing. So when you're sitting there practicing breathing, no matter how much you practice, even for a lifetime, you'll never be able to fully utilize the diaphragm's maximum strength during the breathing process because its maximum strength is never meant for breathing. It's meant to provide support, to stabilize the ribcage, and to help you bear weight. Our pelvic floor muscles are exactly the same. Let's say I have a total strength of 100 jin, but since your internal organs don't weigh 100 jin, when I breathe, I only need to use 10 jin of strength to contract and lift the pelvic floor muscles upward. So, no matter how you practice exhaling and forcefully lifting your anus, even if you try your best to lift it as close as possible to Bai Hui, it's useless. That's because your brain knows you're breathing. And when you breathe, the maximum strength it allows you is just 10 jin. So, even if you practice Kegel exercises every day, you still won't be able to support such heavy internal organs because supporting the internal organs is never about using the strength of your breath. There is a specific kind of strength dedicated to supporting the internal organs. As long as it's a task done by this muscle, when I exhale and use all my strength, you might think that this muscle is exerting itself to the maximum. But that's not the case. That's not how you should look at things. It's not like giving a lecture on stage. Back when I used to give lectures, I mentioned that I lift weights. So I can also make simple, nutritious meals for myself, and I spend 10 hours a day on sports rehabilitation. That time is spent lifting weights, working out. I only spend 1 hour cooking for myself. What you see is just that 1 hour. You can't label me based on that. You might say I'm a chef because I can cook, but I'm actually a sports rehabilitation coach, Most of my time is devoted to that. So you shouldn't just label pelvic floor Kegel exercises as being only about exhalation. Yes, they do have an exhalation function, but that's secondary. Their primary function is to support the internal organs because as humans, we evolved from being on all fours to standing upright. That's the reason why. So when I say, why would you practice exhaling and lifting the pelvic floor while standing? Or while walking? If you do that, you could actually damage a perfectly healthy pelvic floor. When you're walking, your pelvic floor already supports your internal organs using about 20 jin of force, and it will naturally engage. But if you force it to do maximum exhalation and pelvic floor lifting while walking, it only uses about 10 jin of force. So you're confusing your brain. When supporting internal organs, should you use more force to hold them up, or focus on exhaling and lifting the pelvic floor? In the end, the instructor makes you do it this way, and you tell yourself to lift the pelvic floor, regardless of your internal organs. Just focus on lifting the pelvic floor now. So, instead of originally using 20 jin of force, now he's only using 10 jin. Do you understand what I mean? That's why when you practice exhaling and lifting the pelvic floor, it helps you find the sensation of your pelvic floor muscles. However, if this person, I tell fast, after practicing, just sits still, works in an office or lies in bed without moving, then exhaling and lifting the pelvic floor already provides significant help because before, when he exhaled, he couldn't feel the pelvic floor at all and had no control over those muscles. But after practicing Kegel exercises, he's now able to control his pelvic floor muscles. But all that's improved is the strength of his exhalation. That's still a long way from being able to support his internal organs. If you couldn't control it at all before, and now you can control it a little, of course there will be some benefit. That's why people who used to have urinary incontinence or organ prolapse see some improvement after training their pelvic floor muscles. But if you keep training after that, you won't see continuous improvement. Moreover, this person can't do intense exercise. He can't run, can't climb mountains, can't play ball, can't lift weights, can't jump rope. Of course not. How could you possibly rely on the strength of your breath to counteract the heavy impact of your internal organs? He was never meant to do that kind of work in the first place. Exactly. So if you want to improve issues like urinary incontinence or the ability to support internal organs, you have to train that specific function, not just keep strengthening the exhalation function. That's why I say, for people with severe organ prolapse, Those who do a lot of physical activity or those who engage in high-intensity exercise, Kegel exercises are useless. You might even end up making things worse by doing them. Because if you were originally using 20 kilos of strength and now you're only using 10 kilos to support more internal organs, isn't that going to cause problems? The person who invented the Kegel exercise for the pelvic floor didn't lift weights or do other activities, Instead, he focused on finding a way to help you control your pelvic floor muscles in the shortest possible time. So this was a great discovery. But this doesn't mean it can fully support your internal organs, nor does it completely solve the problem of urinary leakage. This is just the beginning. You've only found the sensation of contracting your pelvic floor muscles. Later, when you add this sensation and try to maintain stability, there's another thing. When a muscle is working, it's hard for it to do two things well at the same time. What does that mean? It's like I'm really good at lifting weights and I'm also good at preparing nutritious meals. But you can't expect me to lift weights and prepare nutritious meals perfectly at the same time. And you also can't expect me to be great at lifting weights while I'm cooking, unless you're just being argumentative and say, why can't you work out while cooking? Just put the dumbbells in the pan and stir fry them. That's just nonsense. Our pelvic floor muscles are the same way. They can either help with exhaling or support the internal organs, but you can't expect them to do both at the same time. Let me tell you when the pelvic floor muscles actually serve the function of exhaling. It's only when they don't need to support the internal organs that they help with exhalation. And when is that? When you're lying down. When you're lying down, the weight of your internal organs presses toward your spine, right? It presses toward the spine and not onto the pelvic floor muscles, doesn't it? Exactly. When you're lying down, your pelvic floor muscles don't need to support your internal organs. Yay. So at this time, it's easier for them to contract and lift the anus during exhalation. Moreover, when you exhale in this position, the upward movement of the pelvic floor is even greater. But as soon as you go from lying down to standing up or sitting up, especially when you're running or playing basketball, let me tell you responsibly, when you're running or jumping, the smaller your contact area, the more you need to support yourself on one foot, the more unstable you are. And the greater the impact force, your pelvic floor's ability to contract during exhalation is zero. At this moment, its main responsibility returns to its most important job. So you say, okay, Stacey, supporting your internal organs. It has to prevent your organs from being pushed downward and falling out due to the strong impact. So at this time, it has no ability to contract during exhalation. Don't expect it to prepare a nutritious meal while you're lifting weights, okay? So at this point, do you realize how foolish it is to keep doing those exercises where you contract your pelvic floor while exhaling? Because you're actually ruining its proper function. The pelvic floor isn't supposed to be used for exhalation when you're walking. It's your abdominal muscles and diaphragm that handle breathing during walking. The pelvic floor has nothing to do with it, Magalmain. It's busy doing its most important job. That's why I've specifically taken on many difficult cases of organ prolapse from major hospitals that couldn't be resolved. Do you know what advice the hospitals usually give? Severe organ prolapse means you can't run or jump, right? You're not supposed to do intense activities. But the less you do these things, the more likely you are to experience prolapse. That's because people haven't practiced Kegel exercises correctly. So doctors just judge. You've practiced so long and it's not working. You need surgery. But that's not the case. It's because you don't know how to train properly and you've damaged its function through incorrect training. No teacher explains it like this. They always tell you to contract your pelvic floor while exhaling and train your pelvic floor muscles. That's because you're different from us. You look at someone's reputation and think, this is the latest global technique, so you keep following it. But as I practiced, I discovered something. I laughed. I don't think I'm so stupid that I couldn't learn this. So I started looking for the reason. Why wasn't it working? I realized that the teacher's thinking was too one-sided. They were only helping people find the sensation of the pelvic floor muscle from a single perspective. But that sensation alone can't support the internal organs. Because he's dealing with patients while I'm dealing with people in the gym, so the groups we're facing are different. That's why when I used his method with people in the gym, it didn't work. So I kept searching for answers and tried things out with my clients myself. I finally found the answer. The reason it didn't work is that you're asking someone to lift weights while they're cooking, or to cook while they're lifting weights. You're making them not know how to exert their strength properly. It's like you're forcing them to exhale and contract their pelvic floor while they're supporting their internal organs. They can only follow your instructions because you're making them do it. That's how you end up damaging a perfectly healthy pelvic floor. Once you understand this principle, because in the past we've actually harmed a lot of members, causing them to develop hemorrhoids or urinary leakage through improper training, you can immediately go back and help them fix it. Sometimes you can even see improvement in just one session and solve the problem right away because you've grasped the underlying logic. That's why I say that all over the world. When people do Kegel exercises, if you keep training someone with more severe urinary leakage or prolapse, it's not just that they can't feel it at first. Even after they've found the right sensation, if you continue to guide them through this kind of exercise, it's wrong and it's a serious mistake. That's because you're using the force of their exhalation to support their internal organs.